Welcome to the Carr Brothers with Jeff, Jack, and Jody Carr. They talk about current events, politics, community, and business. Take it away, boys.
Good evening. Thank you for joining the Carr Brothers show. We have a fantastic episode for you tonight. I am Jeff.
And I'm Jody.
I'm Jack. So pleased to be here.
Yes, so as you can see, we're Zooming Jack in tonight. He's a little out of town, so we didn't want to have him miss the opportunity to spend a few minutes with our amazing guest that we have here this evening, Lori Clark, CEO of MB Power. Thank you for being here, Lori.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's excellent. We've been trying to get this lined up for many months. Lori and I back and forth trying to get this scheduled. As most people know or understand what Lori's job is, she's a very busy person, very hard to track down, but this has been in the works. So very happy to have you here with us tonight. How about you just tell us a little bit about when you started with MB Power and some of the transition through the different divisions and
absolutely.
What you did there and on your way to the top, I guess you could say.
Sure. So I started back in Minto at MB Coal way back in the late 80s. I was a summer student there, actually, and worked my way through a number of roles there, working for Andy Cormier, who was the president and CEO at the time. The board was made up of people from MB Power at that time because the MB Coal was a wholly owned subsidiary of MB Power. So I would present to the board there from time to time, and then one day the board asked me if I would come to Fredericton and take a job at MB Power. I started in finance, moved to regulatory, which was an area that I loved, absolutely loved. Hard to believe, but I did like the regulatory area. And then the CEO at the time, Gaetan Thomas, asked me if I would take on a position in human resources, which didn't think that was anything that I would like, but actually a very good learning experience, great growth opportunity for me. Then he asked me if I would go to LaPro and work at the nuclear plant for 2 years. And at the time, I honestly thought, what did I do wrong? What did I do to deserve this? I've been moved around. I didn't realize that at the time I was on a succession path, and they wanted me to get experience in different areas of the company. Worked at the nuclear plant, traveled actually around the world putting together an improvement plan for the station, and traveled to many other nuclear plants in North America and some outside of North America. And then from there I moved into operations and looked after generation, transmission, distribution, customer service, system operations. And then in March 2022, they asked me if I would be the president and CEO. I was very happy, first female president and CEO in MB Power's history.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So coming up on 4 years.
Yes.
And almost the longest serving seat. No, just joking. No, just
One
joking.
never knows.
In recent history, but that is amazing. And you've been, the reputation is that you're approachable, knowledgeable, kind of no skirting around issues or, coming up with excuses or anything like that, pretty upfront and forward. That must have been quite a lot of nice experience, I guess, throughout the organization. Now coming up into the CEO role, what's been your biggest surprise as CEO?
My biggest surprise, I think I worked my whole career wanting to be my own boss. And when you get to be the president of CEO, you answer to a lot of people, a lot
more people.
Well, yeah, whether it's the customers in the province of New Brunswick, or it's the shareholder, or it's the board of directors. There are a lot of people who have oftentimes aligned objectives, but sometimes there are some challenges in aligning all of those objectives. That was one of my biggest surprises coming into the role, was just recognizing how many different people and groups there are to consult with, to work with, and to make sure that that I'm answering to them and addressing the needs that they have. I would say one of the other things I would say is I'm probably the first CEO that actually knows almost everyone in the organization, and I'm happy to say that I can get in the elevator and I know everybody that's in the elevator, and I take a lot of pride in whether I'm at LaPro or whether I'm in Baldoon or at Coulson Cove or in head office, that I know most of the people that work at the company.
They must create an atmosphere where employees are comfortable talking to you and addressing. And do you do you feel you have better access to information in terms of what's going on in the organization as well, and having those contacts throughout the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that I hear lots of things from all different levels of the organization, and obviously friends and family that keep me humble too and tell me what I need to know, which is great. But I also know as CEO, I've heard this before, about 5% of what's really going on in the organization. So, being able to reach in and find those people that will actually tell you the truth of what's happening and keep you current on what's going on is really important. Very important.
I found that very, very helpful when I was cabinet minister for a couple of different departments, especially by the time I got the transportation. It gave me the time to figure out, okay, how does this all work? At ELG, it was good. I knew a lot of people, but when I got to DTI, it was very helpful to be able to reach down in.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're a little nervous to.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't want it to say just for fear of repercussions. But I think when you were in cabinet, Joe, you were asking people to bring information to you at different times if they knew things. So
well, it's really easy for people to tell you what they think you want to hear, but you can't operate that way. You can't be effective that way.
No.
I think people at MB Power would say I was firm but fair. I hold people accountable, but at the same time, I want to know what's really happening, and you have to be open and approachable for that to happen.
Yeah, Jack, do you have any questions out there from Zoom land?
Right off the bat, as we're in this introductory as part of the show, is Lori. First, thanks for coming on. Also, wanted to congratulate you. Just a few days ago, you're a UNB alumni, and you were recognized with the alumni certificate of leadership at the Business Awards by UNB. Tell us about what were your thoughts about that, and to be recognized by your university.
It was a very humbling experience and very well done by the university. So there was a celebration on Thursday evening, and I was asked to give advice to the students. All of the students who had achieved academic excellence were there. So I was asked to give some advice to the students. And then on Friday, I was invited back to the university, and they had my name on the wall of fame, and a toast by Dr. Paul Muzzerall, and it was really well done. But it was very humbling knowing the people that have gone to the University of New Brunswick, and how accomplished many of them are, that I would be chosen for that award. So I was very pleased and excited to do that. And I had my family with me. So I'm a graduate of UNB. My two brothers both graduated from UNB, and both of my children graduated from UNB. So I said it was one of the largest financial contributions my parents had ever made in their life between the three of us kids and my children. They had invested a lot of money in that university. So it was nice to be recognized. And it was nice to have my team from MB Power there. The Minister of Energy was there. The Deputy Minister was there. Good. So it was nice for them to actually come and celebrate with me.
That is nice.
Well, that sounds like a very special night. And you've received another one just last week, I believe, too. You mentioned in Vancouver by Electricity Canada. That's fantastic. And I believe it was a Woman in Leadership Award.
Yeah, that one was special too, because it was nominated from across Canada. So it was a testament to promoting women in leadership and leading by example, and obviously being the first female president in the organization's history, being the first chief nuclear officer in Canada, and half of my executive team is female now. So I think that's a change. It would not have been that way in the past, and we have while the utility itself and the utility industry has about 25% women. We are looking for ways to promote women into leadership roles.
Good.
Fantastic. That's congratulations. Well, we might as well get right into some of the issues. One being the electricity rates. Why not just get right to that one first, because that's always topical. And I believe there's a rate coming up next April, 4%, I believe, and I think it's about 30% increase over the last 4 or 5 years. Will ratepayers, Lori, get any sort of relief with rates, or is this just something that's the norm to expect increases every year?
Yeah, that's a loaded question for sure. Well, what I can say is what's happening in New Brunswick is happening across the industry. So what's happening in New Brunswick is not unique to MB Power. I just came back from Electricity Canada meetings, and all utilities across the country are dealing with the same issues. And the issues that utilities are dealing with are very similar to the types of issues we're dealing with in our everyday life. The cost of everything's going up since COVID. Supply chain costs have just increased substantially. But the other piece of that is at NB Power, over the last number of years, rates have been held artificially low. There was never a good time to raise rates, but rates have been kept artificially low. And we're at a place where there is so much investment and delayed investment in our assets that without making those investments, we run the risk of not being able to provide electricity to the province. So not only would we have a backlog of maintenance on our existing assets, we're also trying to transition to a clean electricity system that's been mandated by the federal government. And in fact, our customers are saying they want the system to be cleaner. And at the same time, load's growing because of electrification, population growth, and then the electrification of industry and transportation. So all of those things are happening at the same time, and it is putting upward pressure on rates. And the utility is carrying a tremendous amount of debt, again, because rates were held artificially low for a number of years. And we're basically at a time where there is no other option but to raise rates. And I would say, we've got a comprehensive review underway in the province of NB Power. Mm-hmm. And, I'm anxious to see what recommendations they may come up with because, I'm open to anything. And I've been scratching my head for a very long time as to how we could reduce rates. I personally don't see a rate reduction. I see an ability to manage the rate of increase, but I do see rate increases on the horizon. And I think that leads to a really interesting concept. There's two parts to a customer's bill. One is the rate, and then the other piece of that is the consumption in kilowatt hours. So we need to do what we can as the utility to manage the rate and keep the rate as low as we can. We also need to offer some programs for customers to help them manage consumption. But I also think customers can take an active role in managing their consumption too, to keep their bills down. That's the focus is on the bill.
Right, because even at home, I go from room to room making sure I turn the light off behind, even if I'm going to be outside of that room for 30 seconds. I turn that light off because it bothers me. But I think there's still lots of room for improvement for myself and our household. And, if everybody in the province could do a little something to reduce their consumption or maybe especially if is it time of use? Is it time of use? That is that what it's called?
Yeah,
the scheme that's going to
smart meters first, and then
there's time. There's going to be times when, and Rudy talked about it when he was on here. Peak times to use different types of power or different expense for power, or when the peak times are. So, when all that comes into play, that'll help me as well and the rest of us try to figure out how to consume less. So if we're consuming less, does that make it easier for NB Power, I guess, as a whole? Or are there more people putting a load on the grid now?
Yeah, so we do see the actual...
Did that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah, it does. Our load is growing, though. Our load is growing. I think what's important to note is we have a winter peaking system. So we have to have assets on our system that will serve New Brunswickers on the coldest day of the year. Mm-hmm. So, when it's 25 degrees below zero, we need to be able to have every asset turned on to supply New Brunswickers. But
the
in
dirty
the middle of
ones
summertime,
and the clean ones both, right? Because as a public, we demand to have energy.
Yeah,
it's
quality of life for New Brunswickers. And but in the summertime, our load can be half of that. So we can basically serve the load with Mactaquac and LaPro and maybe Bayside on. But in the background, we have to have all of these other assets sitting so that on the coldest day of the year, we can supply the province with electricity. So we really need to reduce the peak. If we can reduce the peak, then that means we can avoid building new generation in the future, because other than the peak, we have enough assets. Now, cleaning the system is a different issue, but as load grows, we need to have more assets to be able to provide electricity to customers. And as we bring on more renewables, wind and solar, they are intermittent. So you can't rely on them to be available all the time. So in addition to those assets, we have to build the backup for those when they're not available. So, some people say solar and wind are some of the cheapest forms of electricity, and they absolutely are when they're running. But from a system cost, we have to have something sitting, running, waiting in the background in the event that the wind
Right.
doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine.
And what's the most effective and efficient kind of backup plan to keep running and waiting to be used? It's probably a consideration you have to think about, right?
Well, yeah, and our legislation would say we always have to look at a least cost option for New Brunswickers. So there is some work needed to be done with legislation as well if we're going to transition to a cleaner grid, because the cheapest solution will not always be the cleanest solution.
So you're balancing all of those competing kind of interest or demands. People want cheaper power and they want clean power, and we have existing assets.
Reliable power.
And reliable power, yeah. So you've got all of those moving parts you have to kind of consider together as a group.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we have to consider is affordability. It's all of those things, and then the affordability crisis that we're in New Brunswick as well. All of those things need to come into consideration.
So when MB Power talks about asking consumers or encouraging consumers to consume, to use less, why is it in MB Power's best interest for people to use less power?
Well, there's a couple of reasons for it. One is helping New Brunswickers manage their bills, because while we have some of the lowest rates in Canada, because of the high dependence on electric baseboard heating, we have some of the highest bills in Canada. So that when people look at
But why would MB Power really
care?
Yeah, because it feels like you do, sometimes MB Power doesn't, but you say, MB Power will say, we keep your bills low, but you're getting, is there a conflict there?
No, absolutely not. If we are able to keep rates low and stable and consumption low, then that will avoid large build in the future.
Right. So, and you touched on that before.
Yes.
So it is
to replace like Coulson Cove and places that are aging out, right?
And we do have assets coming to end of life, but as we bring on new load, that's actually advancing the build sooner than just waiting until some of our other assets retire.
So the demand is increasing, obviously, as society houses growth. The population has gone up.
Yes.
In New Brunswick quite a bit. So the major projects, like Point LaPro, what's your biggest challenges right now? Like, you've got Mactaquac, Point LaPro, a new gas plant.
All of the above, actually, all of the above. But I'll just take one at a time. LaPro, we have not put the money into LaPro coming out of refurbishment. So we did a major refurbishment of LaPro back in 2008. Plant came back online in 2012, and we'd replaced all the nuclear components of the station, but we had not replaced any of the turbines or generators or pumps or motors on the non-nuclear side. That was one of the lessons learned from refurbishment, and OPG and Bruce have learned that lesson, and they've done all of the work at the time of refurbishment. So it's like putting a brand new motor in a vehicle, but not replacing any of the other components. So we are now into replacing some of those those old components that need to be replaced in the station. So we know that when the plant runs well, that the company does well. But when the plant doesn't run well or reliably, then it puts incredible pressure on the operations and keeping the supply to New Brunswickers reliable, and the cost of electricity go up when we have to purchase power on the open market when LaPro's not there. So getting LaPro to high levels of performance has been a real challenge, and that went back to making the right investments in the station. We are on a path now to see that level of improvement, but we haven't been able to show New Brunswickers yet that we can sustain those high levels of performance.
And because the regular public, we wouldn't know whether the proper investments are being put into the repairs of these facilities and assets and that. So, do you say we're on the path? Like, is it like where is it? How far along are we where you'd like to see? The status of that of Point LaPro.
Our 26-27 budget has LaPro operating at higher than normal levels of performance and what we've seen in the past. And I would say from there, you'll just see a glide path where we see increased performance.
So it's been a real focus of yours to catch up on that, because it kind of seems like regular maintenance or regular renewal.
Yeah,
and
the last 2 years, though, we've taken outages that have been in the 140, 150 day range to make sure that we're putting the right investments in the station. And those were not planned, but they were necessary in order to keep the plant reliable. Never an issue with the safety of the plant.
No.
There'd be no issue with the safety, but just making sure that it's always available to us.
And then, so is it shut down right now?
It's on a maintenance outage right now.
It is still on the maintenance, so I guess.
Yeah, ready to come up in December.
Pulp mills and places like that would call it a shutdown for maintenance or whatever. So what'd you call it?
It's a planned maintenance outage.
Okay, and that's down now. So when is that expected to end?
Yeah, mid-December we should have the plant back online. Yes,
so then before our cold snap season of January, February.
Yes. It'd be nice to have it on in December, but we did know going into this outage in July we needed to do a generator rewind and the parts weren't available, so we had to push the outage out a bit because of the parts. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned at that peak level of demand, if we go over that peak level, are you able to, you or MB Power, able to import or buy power outside of New Brunswick?
We are.
And
absolutely.
do we do that often?
We do often. We are geographically, we have a huge advantage because we have neighbors in Nova Scotia, neighbors in Quebec, neighbors in Maine. So those are all good interconnections that we have in the event that we want to and need to purchase. And so we look at it on an economic basis. If we can buy and import cheaper than running one of our own stations, we will do that.
And would that be the case on an ongoing basis?
Always.
Like, we have this plant, that plant. So why are we paying extra for producing our own power, and does that become a policy decision? Or
it's economic dispatch is the way we dispatch all of our resources. So cheapest plants come on first, and then you get the more expensive ones, and then you look at purchases in there to see whether or not they're more economical than purchasing. And purchasing is great when you don't have a reliability concern. So I'll go back to
from your suppliers.
Go back to 2023 when we had minus, I want to say it was minus 40, minus 50 degrees, and everybody around us was peaking at the same time. Their systems were peaking. So Hydro-Quebec, Nova Scotia, they had nothing to provide to us. So it's really important for those coldest days of the year that you can supply your own electricity in province. Nice to look at different options from an economic perspective, but you also need to have that backup that you can provide your own electricity if you have to.
You're beholden to someone else, and I think probably that touches on the history of MB Power in terms of being a part of a sustainable province and kind of supporting our communities for growth and economic prosperity and good living, and maybe touched on why people wanted it owned by New Brunswickers as well, just to have that kind of stability for the future. But Prince Edward Island just announced, or there was some news out there that said that they may have to do regular shutdowns or regular
brownouts. Blackouts.
Brownouts. Why would that be, and why is it kind of that supply that's available, or like? Would that ever happen in New Brunswick? I guess, is that what you're talking about, trying to avoid? Yeah,
it is a real risk. It's a risk for, I would say, most provinces in Canada right now. What's driving it, same thing in Nova Scotia and in New Brunswick, we see rising population and load for electricity. And at the same time, supply chain challenges. Like, we are very lucky that this gas plant that we want to locate in New Brunswick, that we got in the queue early, because right now if we were trying to negotiate with a supplier, we would be out in the 2030s, 2032 timeframe in order to get combustion turbines, because they're wanted all over, not just Canada, but in the U.S. as well. So,
and is PEI, are they dependent on outside sources all the time? They don't generate there?
They have some on island resources generation, but they're also looking to put a gas plant on the island just like we are. But they're negotiating now, but I expect their dates are out in 2030 and 2032 in order to get supply. And Nova Scotia is dealing with exactly the same thing.
Well, I tell you, folks, we could spend 3 hours here talking to Lori about all of the information and the facets of MB Power and the inner workings and the outer workings and where the load comes from and where it doesn't. But we're going to take a short break here at the end of this first segment. When we come back, Jack and Jody and I are going to have a few more questions for Lori, and Lori's got a wealth of information. She's more than happy to share it with us. So we may have to bring you in again in the early in the new year, maybe in March or something like that, just to talk about other things. But we're going to take a few seconds now to hear from our stakeholders and our advertisers from CHCO, and we'll be right back in a few short minutes. Well, welcome back to the Carr Brothers Show. This is episode 152. We're delighted to have CEO of MB Power, Lori Clark, with us this evening. I am Jeff.
I'm Jody.
And I'm Jack, tuning in from Winnipeg. So it's great to be here and great to have Lori Clark, CEO of MB Power, on our show tonight.
Well, we're very excited because that's like the first time we've had CEO from MB Power, high-ranking official, first female at MB Power as well, and by all accounts, good reputation of being approachable, firm, but also fair and approachable, and upfront with the issues that we're facing. So we really appreciate that. When we left off the first segment, we were talking about Point Lepreau and some future challenges there, but an emphasis of MB Power to invest in the ongoing maintenance so we can get the full utilization of the benefit of Point Lepreau. And then we have not yet talked, or is there anything else you want to say about that, or we were going to move into Mactaquac and the new gas plant? So Mactaquac Dam, should people be worried? Do we have a plan there? Has that plan been finalized? I forget where that was.
Brunswickers should not be worried.
No,
we definitely have a plan, and the dam is safe, so we should start with that.
Okay.
But the issue with the Mactaquac Dam is it was built in 1968 and it was intended to last 100 years. So we are at midlife of the asset, and it's time to replace the generators and turbines and the wear parts. So that would happen under any circumstances because we're midlife. But the other big item that's happening at Mactaquac is all of the concrete and the civil work that's done at the plant is suffering from a chemical reaction called AAR, which is alkaline aggregate reaction. So it's the concrete is actually swelling.
Oh,
so it
unexpected,
is unexpected. And the Princess Margaret Bridge had the same issue. Several hydro dams in Quebec suffer from the same thing, and there are cases of it around the world. Unluckily for us, it has impacted the structures at the dam. So the earthen dam, the earth part of the dam is fine. There's no issue with that at all. It is the concrete that's swelling, and it's causing cracks in the concrete. And we spent a lot of money in the last few years reinforcing the concrete, but it isn't a long-term solution. So the project that we're looking at is replacing the turbines and generators, which were at end of life. And the other part of the project is around replacing the concrete that is suffering from this chemical reaction. And as you know, there's spillways, powerhouse, a lot of structures that are built from concrete in that facility. So not a safety issue. It will become a reliability issue if we don't do something, in order to get the turbines to run and everything to be aligned properly and the gates to open and close properly. All of those things the concrete needs to be repaired to ensure that can happen.
So the refurbishment then has expanded basically into this kind of repair or refurbishment replacement of the concrete. So
Right.
it's expanded in scope.
Yes, it has, and it's putting pressure on the walls and all of the structures. So we're seeing cracking and deterioration of the concrete.
And will that then extend the life of the facility, or is this still just going to be considered a half-life
We
upgrade?
want to get to end of life, and then we'll look when we get there as to what other life extension we can do.
Okay,
But
that's true.
yes.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we've still got a few years to get to 2068, and then we'll, as we get closer, we'll continue. We don't see any case where we'd shut the dam down at all. We just look what investments required.
But if that time comes, if we'll be doing a weekly show.
But if you're replacing the concrete, then do you anticipate doing that for the future instead of just replacing what's...
We should be able to get another 100 years out of the concrete once it's in place.
Like that,
yes.
You might
probably your turbines.
Replace the turbines.
All that would be ready at end of life to be done again.
Yes.
Some kind of technology set in there.
It is a least cost option. That's the other thing. We looked at a number of different options, and this was the least cost option for New Brunswickers in terms of what we would do with the station.
Is there a start date for that yet?
Well, we've started a number of years ago with the planning and engineering, and it's a big project, and the price tag is anywhere between $7 and $9 billion at this point in time. So it's a very expensive project, and in being well prepared, we started early with the engineering and planning. We're now moving into the next phase, which will be early works and getting the infrastructure in place so that we can bring the number of people we need to on site and start to put shovels in the ground in the 2027, 2028 period.
It's funny, you sometimes still run into the people that worked on the first building of the Mactaquac Dam. Usually it starts with that it was Louis Robichaud that hired me to work on the dam, and then carried over. But
while I say it's like a potentially a $9 billion project, we're still refining that estimate.
So more like 18 billion.
No, less. I'm hoping.
Okay,
but it will be done over probably a 10 to 12 year period. So it's not $9 billion being spent in 12 months. It'll be done over a long-term period. We'll take one unit out of service at a time. We'll look at the unit and we'll put the next one, take the next one out, check and adjust, learn from the previous one, get more proficient at it as we go along, and hopefully speed it up so we can speed the project up over time.
There's going to be some economic benefits, though, on that as far as labor, contractors, and things like that.
First Nations as well, involvement in the project. It's a big project.
From watching my friends at Leuna, my friends at the St. John Construction Association, the MB Construction Association, very excited to be able to be taking part in a refurbishment. It could give a tradesperson 10 to 15 years of work.
Absolutely.
Year over year over year, potentially. Yeah. So,
and there is one of the things we are working really hard at is trying to make sure we do have the labor and workforce in the province. There are a lot of projects underway, whether it's in Newfoundland or Quebec, Nova Scotia, and making sure that we have that skilled labor here in New Brunswick to be able to provide support to the project is very important.
Our good friend Arlene Dunn in St. John has been piping about it quite a bit lately and following it along and been going to the meetings, and she's with the St. John Construction Association.
Yes.
So former colleague of mine at the legislature, but she's up on it and she's watching it. And
back to Point Lepreau. Did we discuss whether there's a decision to refurbish or to shut down completely? Like, is there a timeline of how long the plant is going to be operational based on the previous refurbishments? And
the plant will run for a number of years. I don't have the actual date of retirement, but I would see a life extension in its future, and probably new nuclear also being built in the province.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like another plant?
Another plant.
Oh, yeah. Like, talking
really
like
with
years and years down the road.
The federal government regulations that are in place today, there are only a couple of options. Right now it would be gas or nuclear or batteries, basically. And as we go forward, gas won't even be an option. So I think there are limited options in terms of baseload resources.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, oil's out big time. Anything.
Coal's out.
Fuel's out. Coal's
Natural
out,
gas has a limited life.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think 2030 is the deadline for coal, isn't it?
It is.
I think so. Beldoon has to be off, completely. And that affects Nova Scotia because they've got 6 or 8 coal plants running down there, I believe. So
they do.
There's going to be it's a race. It's a race to have your base load clean.
Any other questions about Mactaquac or Jack? Or
No, I'm good on Mactaquac. A significant amount, but as you said, it's spread out over 10 or 12 years. Also about Point Lepreau, though, onto that, when do you estimate or maybe you just said that you didn't have the dates in front of you, but when do you ballpark estimate that a new one would have to be built?
Yeah, I don't have that date in front of me because it's based on effective full power hours, and I don't know how many hours are left on some of the life limiting components. So I do think it's I think it's in the 2050 range. It's somewhere around there. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. And then now, just quickly, we have a little bit of time to talk about the proposed gas plant in Tantramar, and it's $1 billion there. Where are we at with the stages and the approval? I believe that NB Power is asked to have the regulations fast-tracked, or I guess the environmental
EIA, environmental impact assessment, was that
environmental
it?
things like that. I thought you've asked for that to be fast-tracked in order to get this up and running.
So, yeah, actually, I think there's a little bit of misconception about that.
Okay.
What we did was, because it was a power purchase agreement that we were signing with a third party who was actually building the facility, the legislation was unclear as to whether or not the EUB had jurisdiction to rule on that or not. So we asked for clarification from the Energy and Utilities Board that if we put an application in front of them and waited, 2 or 3 months, went through a process, and then got to the end and they said, sorry, we don't have jurisdiction, we would have wasted time. So we filed an application to say, do you think you have jurisdiction? And should we file with you, or should we go another route to get approval for the gas plant? They seized jurisdiction and said that it's a cost that's borne by New Brunswick ratepayers, and that they believed that it should be something that they looked at and gave an opinion on. So we filed evidence with them, and the hearing is scheduled in the new year. So not delaying anything in terms of timeline. We had this built into our schedule in the event that we had to go in front of the Energy and Utilities Board. And the EIA is underway at the same time. We didn't ask for that to be fast-tracked. We know it's an important step in the process for public acceptance and social license, so it's really important that we get that. And we're continuing to work with First Nations to ensure that if they have an interest in being part of the project, that there is an equity component for them.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good.
Yeah, the
very
EIA process is it's pretty intricate. Like, no stone was left unturned.
Yeah,
as a
it's
former
detailed
minister of
process.
environment, it's the people at ELG. They go through that quite thoroughly, and if they don't have the expertise there, they bring the expertise in to make sure that every step's being followed.
And it's important because New Brunswickers, any of the concerns that I've heard to date are around water and air and wildlife and fish and
that all gets covered in an EIA.
Right.
How
you mitigate it.
How is the location chosen, or the Tantramar area? Like, is that a special process that's used, or is...
Yeah, we so at NB Power, what we did was we looked across the province, and what we were looking for was land that was close to the transmission system to minimize the cost of connecting to the transmission system. The other thing was next to a natural gas pipeline to minimize the costs associated with connecting to the gas pipeline. And then ideally it would have been land that we owned, so that we didn't have to expropriate, or we didn't have to negotiate on a land deal. There were 2 sites that we found that were ideal. We thought were ideal. One was in Skiduk and one was in Tantramar. We thought the Skiduk site was going to be the site that we chose, because the Skiduk site was in an industrial park and it would have been out of the way. And so that was our first stop, and we thought we could actually site it there. We did some work with First Nations, and there were some First Nation artifacts that were there. There was also a waterway that was concerning as to whether or not we could get a permit. And there was a pileated woodpecker on the land as well, which we knew would cause some challenges and timing for the project as well. So the next best site was Centre Village. And I know there is some opposition to the site, but we will go through the EIA process and rectify anything that is of concern there. And the site is, a kilometer in the woods, and, we're trying to do everything to work with the local community, keep them aware of what's happening, and also work with First Nations to make sure that the project goes forward and is accepted. And I think, the risk that we run is that without this proponent and without this gas plant, there is a real risk that we will not have enough electricity in 2028 to supply the province. So we're working really hard with all of the interested parties to make sure we can come up with something that works for
Especially
everyone.
if our population keeps growing and industry grows. And they're talking about a data center down in Lornville. Well, that requires energy. anything we want to open in New Brunswick requires more energy. And if we can't supply that energy, we don't have growth. So one has to complement the other.
So I guess that is another reason why if homeowners can use less, then that frees up demand for other economic projects or other demand that increases, or it frees up demand for our neighbors who's moving in, or all different sorts of reasons.
We have to take a quick break, so we'll be back to you in just a few minutes.
So now the debt, these all cost billions and billions and billions. We have existing debts of 5 point some odd billion. So that you must have the projections of what that has as an impact, not the debt, but I guess the cost and what you expect in increased power and rates. And I've heard that it's unsustainable, and this is for the province to have to decide: do they take over the debt, or what's your response to the debt issue?
I said this at Public Accounts, and I think I was quoted by the reporters as saying it. It keeps me up at night. The debt of MB Power keeps me up at night.
Because it seems pretty substantial.
Yeah, it is, and we've got significant debt on the horizon. But I think it's hard to have the discussion about debt without looking at assets, and we have a large amount of assets on our balance sheet too. So as a regulated utility, we recover the costs of our assets over the life of our assets. So we will always have, as an asset intensive industry, we will always have a lot of high cost assets on our balance sheet. And as a result, we will also have a lot of debt on our balance sheet. But what comfort I get is we didn't get here overnight, and to think that we are going to fix this overnight is wrong. But if we can put modest rate increases, focus on cost reduction within the utility, help our customers manage their usage, then we can solve this problem. But putting an artificial 80-20 debt equity ratio and timeline in place to do that doesn't make sense for New Brunswickers, given the affordability challenge that we're in. And I do think, when we're able to plan out the rate increases and follow a process where there isn't freezing rates, and our ability to put the rates in place that need to be there, we will see MB Power's debt come down.
Because those artificial rates, freezes or caps, or maybe instead of 3%, they were in under 2 to avoid
or zeros
to avoid public scrutiny or pressures, political, whatever. But just like any other kind of holiday, you're really just pushing that problem down the road, pushing the problem of the utility, the debt, the assets down the road. So, and
it's I would say, if you ask customers if they want to pay now or pay later, everyone's going to say, I would say it myself, pay later. Yeah. But we're at the place where it's later.
It's now later.
It's later, unfortunately. And as a cost of service utility, we don't have a return that we get. We're break even, basically break even.
Are there any assets right now that we really shouldn't be operating because of the costs, the benefit, the condition that they're in, or you pretty well feel?
Yeah, we need all of the assets that are on our system right now, and they all serve very different purposes.
For different reasons.
Different purposes on our system. But we have jet engines, combustion turbines in Millbank and St. Rose, and they come on the coldest day of the year, and they're incredibly expensive. But we are darn glad they're there when we need them. So we don't use them often, but when we do need them, it's because otherwise we wouldn't be able to serve the load in New Brunswick.
Last resort.
Jack, before we moved on to my little rant about EIAs, you had something you wanted to add in there. Do you remember what it was?
Well, yeah, just sticking with debt and with rates. As we talked about with rates, I think it's going up 4%, maybe in April 1st. Coming up in 2026 would be about a 30% increase in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, everything else has gone up as well. MB Power is not the only entity that has to raise anything. But do you think there'd be a point where we have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, for rate increases so that it's just out on the table and good for budgeting for not only NB Power, the government, but also ratepayers as well. Do you see that in the future as an option?
Well, right now we have to provide, by legislation, we have to provide a 3-year plan. So whether we ask for 3 years of rate increases or we ask for 1 year rate increase from the Energy and Utilities Board, we're required to put 3 years in front of the Energy and Utilities Board, in front of government, in fact, before we go to the Energy and Utilities Board. In the previous legislation, we had to put a 10-year rate plan in place. And, it was outdated the day it was written. And, you run into something like COVID or some of the challenges we've had with LaPro or fuel prices going through the roof for whatever reason. We're subject to so many world commodities. Carbon tax, that's a great one.
Then
so
looks like you don't know what you're
it's
doing.
really difficult to be able to forecast out that far. But, right now the 3-year plan is what we have, and we'll do an internal plan that takes us out 10 years. But, I can tell you whatever I tell you rates will be in year 6 is not what rates will be in year 6, just because of the volatility in the markets in which we operate.
And then now with, you mentioned the debt, you mentioned about rates, I guess still goes to the importance of just the everyday Joe Blow consumer that can do their part. I guess one of the benefits, I suppose, of rate increases is it will have ratepayers, once it as it's getting painful, which it is for a lot of people, then they're looking at ways to conserve and to reduce their consumption. And that's part of NB Power's program, is to educate and to raise awareness.
Yes.
When we
That's
had
why the
Rudy
rates are
Fowler
going
on,
up.
he talked about that as well. So what percentage right now do you think that NB Power ratepayers, what's the percentage of where there could be savings? Do you have an estimate of what the savings could be if all New Brunswickers, all ratepayers practice better consumption? Do you have a number?
Yeah,
I
don't.
That would be what the potential is?
I don't have that number, unfortunately. I think with time of use rates and smart meters being installed, we would have a better idea of some of those things. And I think some of the challenge is some New Brunswickers can't reduce their power consumption. So, unfortunately, it's some of our most vulnerable customers because they live in rental housing that's large or not insulated well. And then we have other homeowners who maybe can't afford to make the investments that are needed to improve the overall efficiency of their home envelope. So I think there is a lot of opportunity there for, I would say, our businesses and those that are financially able to make investments. Insulation, not a fun or sexy thing to talk about, but insulation is one of the things that we need more insulation in homes in New Brunswick. And then a movement from baseboard electric heat to heat pumps will help with that overall reduction in
just because of
load as well.
they run more efficient.
Their inefficiency of baseboard electric heat.
Yep.
But it's hard to get a handle on what the opportunity is because we don't have without smart meters being fully installed, it's really hard to tell intermittently what people are using for electricity or how much they're using. And then some of the larger homes, customers just don't have the ability to do anything because they're renting or they don't have the financial means to do it.
And that's kind of one of the discussions I wanted to be able to get into this evening. We're just going to run out of time. Is like some of the efficiency programs that are there. What were there? Are they coming back? Or smart meters, net zeroing, the involvement of smart meters. Rudy was on and talked in favor of smart meters. People should be able to know what they're using for power when it's cheaper to use their power, and he's a proponent of that. But we're not going to get into those discussions. The wintertime non-disconnect policy that you touched on there, Jack. We've got a few minutes left. So is there something we want to pivot to and talk about? Jack, you kind of mentioned the wintertime non-disconnect policy, but we've got probably 5 minutes max left. So, or did you want to stay on what you were on?
Well, just on this, I guess on the smart meters is always a topic. There's a certain percentage that's not on there. There's going to be a fee for people that aren't on smart meters to, I guess, funnel people to corral them to have the smart meter. I guess if the smart meter is a step for consumption education to help people realize there's this piece of equipment that Rudy mentioned that you can hook up into your house, and it tells you what consumes what, which appliance, which item consumes, and that's helps for education to realize whether or not to cut it or not. But yeah, I guess basically just trying to help New Brunswickers as much as everyone can to be able to reduce consumption. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of places that can't reduce, a lot of homes that can't reduce consumption. So I guess what sort of programs are there to help them? They can't reduce it, but they can maybe be provided supports.
Yeah, I think there's the program that the provincial government offers, funded by the provincial government and federal government, offered through our energy efficiency group, is if you make less than $70,000 a year, then you're eligible for free air sealing, free insulation, and mini split heat pump in your home. We have a waiting list for that program. It's very popular, but we have helped a number of New Brunswickers with that. The other thing we've done is Knowledge is Power campaign for 2025. So coming out of a very rough winter last year where customers were very unhappy about their bills, we did a review of our billing and metering system and smart meters, whether they were working properly, and found out that everything was working properly. But what we did find out is that New Brunswickers, in a lot of cases, don't understand what appliances in their homes are using electricity. And, somebody will say, well, I changed all my light bulbs, or I turned the lights out in each room. And while that does use electricity, the biggest items are baseboard electric heat, inefficient heating in homes, dryers, those sorts of things. So we have spent a lot of time educating, providing educational material to customers to say, if you're using your baseboard electric heat, this is what you could see in terms of a monthly bill, and different things that they're using in their home. And I think smart meters is a way to make it more visible. I've often used the analogy, if you went into a grocery store and picked your groceries up every night and left and didn't pay for them, and they sent you a bill at the end of the month, you'd probably be shocked at what you're paying for your groceries. Well, that's what we do with electricity. You use it all month. We send you a bill at the end of the month, and people will say, I don't remember
we don't
that.
Really say exactly.
So at least if there's visibility on what people are using, then they can take more control of.
And then getting
usage.
it broken down even further. So is there an opportunity with smart meters to break it right down by circuit or by time of day? Because it's accurate, but you can't really get right
it's
down
aggregated,
into the,
So we can give it on 15-minute intervals, and then there are appliances like Rudy would know about that you can attach to your meter, and then you can break it down by how much different things in your house.
Because maybe somebody has an inefficient appliance working and they don't even know.
Exactly.
So with that demand, with future costs of assets, with future growth, tying those conservations or reductions of energy use to help individually our bills, to help keep the pressure down on rates. So it all kind of seems to tie in together, doesn't it?
It does.
So we might not need as much rate increases if we use less, and then also using less could potentially mean we don't have to invest in new assets
or defer those assets,
or defer
at least.
them at least.
Yeah.
So that would have an impact on the bottom line. So it's almost like a shared responsibility if we knew more about that. And but I think for me personally, it has helped a lot with your explanations around the challenges you're facing, the future costs, consumption, demand. It's been really helpful. You've been very open and forthright with it, so we really appreciate that. And I think we have to have you back soon.
I
think we're going to have you back.
There's so many more things to talk about.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Rudy talked about is trying to explain to the public what a kilowatt hour actually is, and what does that mean relative to their bill and what they're using for energy.
Yeah, electricity is a lot like air. It's just hard to understand how people use it, right?
So if you could have a mail out on Send
that we're all going to read.
Yeah, put it in the bill. What is a kilowatt hour? So
okay.
Anyway, we're out of time.
Guys.
Anything really quick, Lori?
No, thanks for the opportunity. I think these discussions are helpful for me when I hear the questions that are of interest to you, but also in getting the information out to New Brunswickers. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah,
Jack, anything you wanted to say in closing?
Well, I just want to thank you, Lori, for joining us on a Carr Brothers show. Thanks very much.
It's quite an honor to have you here, and keep up the good work. Congratulations on your awards, and we'll have you back for sure.
Yeah.
Get some updates.
Yeah, definitely. So with that being said, you can check out our show right here on CHCO, obviously, on our Facebook channel, our YouTube channel, or any podcast platform that you prefer to use. We're on all of them. Jack keeps us up to date on those at all times. On behalf of Jack and Jody, I'm Jeff, and we will see you next Thursday night. Good night.